The night in Cedar Falls was colder than usual. A dense fog covered the cobblestone streets of the small town, while raindrops fell in a steady rhythm, creating a melancholic symphony on the clay rooftops. Sergeant James Mitchell walked with heavy steps toward his car. He had just completed another solitary shift, the umpteenth since his canine partner Luna had retired from police service 6 months ago due to an injury to her hind legs. The clock was approaching midnight when he spotted an unusual movement in the fog. At first it seemed like just a shadow dancing in the mist, but it soon took on defined contours. A golden Labrador, soaked and visibly exhausted, emerged from the fog like a silent spectre. Between her teeth, she delicately carried a small, trembling puppy, almost as golden as she was. James stopped, instinctively placing his hand on his holster. Years of service had shaped his reflexes, but something in that scene made him relax immediately. The Labrador approached with hesitant steps, her brown eyes fixed on his, conveying a silent message that crossed the distance between them like lightning. The rain intensified, but neither moved. Man and animal maintained their connected gaze for a time that seemed to extend beyond the seconds the clock marked. Then, in a gesture James would never forget, the Labrador lowered herself and carefully placed the puppy at his feet. The small animal barely moved, its tiny body violently shaking. James crouched down to examine it better, and when he looked up again, he saw something that left him speechless. Tears were streaming from the Labrador's eyes, mixing with the rain that soaked her fur. She looked alternately at the puppy and at the officer, as if wordlessly begging for help. "Hey girl," James murmured, his voice almost inaudible under the drumming of the rain. "What happened to you two?" He slowly extended his hand, expecting the animal to back away or show her teeth. Instead, the Labrador remained still, just watching as he lightly touched her wet head. Her ribs were visible beneath her fur, and one of her front paws showed signs of an old, poorly healed injury. There was no collar, no visible identification. When James carefully picked up the puppy, wrapping it in his jacket to protect it from the rain, the Labrador took 2 steps back. She seemed ready to leave, as if her mission was accomplished. "Wait," said James, with a firmness in his voice that he hadn't used since the day Luna had to leave service. "You don't need to go. Come with me." The Labrador stopped, tilting her head slightly to the side as if trying to understand the words. James extended his free hand in her direction, a silent invitation. "Come on, girl, both of you, let's get out of this rain." For a moment it seemed the Labrador would disappear into the same fog from which she had emerged, but then, with the same hesitation as before, she took a step forward, then another, and another until she was beside James, looking at him with what he could only describe as gratitude. James's small cabin on the outskirts of Cedar Falls was simple but welcoming, a structure of wood and stone that he had renovated over the years, initially as a weekend retreat, then as his permanent home when the silence of his apartment in town became unbearable after Luna's retirement. He placed the puppy on a soft blanket near the hastily lit fireplace. The small animal looked even more fragile in the firelight, his eyes half closed and his breathing irregular. The adult Labrador maintained a respectful distance, watching James's every move with vigilant attention. "You need food," he muttered, more to himself than to the animals. In the kitchen, he found the remains of the premium dog food he still kept for Luna's occasional visits, who now lived with his sister on the outskirts of Minneapolis. He filled one bowl with fresh water and another with the food, placing them on the floor near the Labrador. Then he moistened a soft cloth in warm water and began to gently clean the puppy. The Labrador didn't immediately touch the food. Instead, she approached the puppy, sniffing it and gently licking its muzzle, as if wanting to make sure it was okay. Only after this maternal check did she turn her attention to the water bowl, drinking with controlled eagerness. "You're a good mother," commented James, sitting on the wooden floor to observe them better. While the Labrador finally ate the offered food, James noticed something curious. She seemed to understand basic commands without him fully verbalizing them. When he made an almost unconscious gesture with his hand, the same one he used to ask Luna to sit, the Labrador interrupted her meal and sat immediately, looking at him attentively. "Sit," he said, testing his theory. The Labrador remained seated, confirming his suspicion. "Paw." Without hesitation, she extended her right paw toward him. James felt a lump in his throat. This wasn't just any abandoned dog. Someone had trained this animal, invested time in her. How had she ended up in that state, alone in the rain with a puppy on the verge of exhaustion? The rest of the night passed in comfortable silence, interrupted only by the crackling of the fireplace and the increasingly regular breathing of the puppy. At some point, James fell asleep in the worn armchair next to the fire. When the first rays of sunlight came through the cracks of the wooden windows, he woke up with a strange sensation, a weight on his feet. The Labrador had settled on the floor, leaning against his legs, in a protective posture that encompassed not only the puppy nestled at her side, but also the man who had welcomed them. Her brown eyes, now visible in the daylight, observed him with a mixture of caution and what seemed like hope. James checked his watch, and for the first time in 25 years of service, decided that the police station could wait. He picked up the phone and called his superior. "Captain, I need a day off, personal matter," he said simply. He hung up before he could hear the surprise in the voice on the other end of the line. There was something more important to do now. The puppy needed urgent medical attention, and the Labrador also needed care. "Let's see what Dr. Wilson can do for you both," he said, getting up slowly so as not to disturb the animals. Today is a new day. The Labrador rose at the same time as he did, as if perfectly understanding his intentions. When James bent down to pick up the puppy, she showed no sign of territorial protection or fear. On the contrary, she seemed relieved to share the responsibility. Outside, the fog from the previous night had dissipated. The sun shone on the mountains surrounding Cedar Falls, reflecting off the waters of the distant lake. A new day was beginning for the three of them. Dr. Wilson's veterinary clinic was located in the historic center of Cedar Falls, occupying a colonial building with thick walls and narrow windows. The doorbell chimed when James entered, carrying the puppy wrapped in a clean towel, closely followed by the Labrador, who maintained an alert but calm posture. Dr. Wilson, a middle-aged man with graying hair and gentle eyes behind round glasses, looked up from the papers he was examining with evident surprise. "Sergeant Mitchell, it's been a while. I heard about Luna, I'm sorry." James nodded briefly, acknowledging the mention of his canine partner's retirement without wanting to prolong the subject. "Doctor, I found these two last night. The puppy doesn't look good, and the mother is malnourished and possibly dehydrated." Doctor Wilson immediately assumed his professional demeanor, indicating the examination table where James carefully placed the puppy. The Labrador followed the movement, staying close, but without interfering. "She's a very disciplined mother," observed the veterinarian as he examined the puppy. "So normally they would be trying to keep me away from the baby." "She seems trained," replied James, "responds to basic commands." The examination of the puppy was quick and concerning. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, low body temperature. Dr. Wilson immediately prepared a solution for intravenous hydration and asked his assistant to prepare a heated bed for the small animal. "We'll need to keep him under observation for at least 48 hours, he explained while working. "The next few hours will be critical." He then turned his attention to the adult Labrador. The examination revealed a less severe but still concerning situation. Moderate malnutrition, some old scars already healed, signs of a recent pregnancy. "She probably had more puppies," commented the veterinarian. "You only found this one?" James confirmed with a nod, feeling a pang of concern for the fate of the other possible puppies. It was during the routine check with a microchip reader that Dr. Wilson's expression changed. "She has a chip, but it seems to be damaged. I can only read part of the code." James felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. A chip meant the Labrador had a home, a documented past. Perhaps someone was looking for her. Dr. Wilson worked on his computer for a few minutes, trying to trace the partial identification. "Here it is," he finally said. "The record is incomplete due to the chip damage, but I can see that she was originally registered to a David Henderson from Oak Ridge. Apparently he was a service dog trainer." "Was?" James caught the verb tense. The veterinarian nodded, continuing to read the information on the screen. "He passed away approximately 8 months ago. After that, the record shows a transfer to... interesting. The clinic that made the transfer is known for working with adoptions. It seems our friend was adopted after her trainer's death, and then abandoned when they discovered she was pregnant," concluded James, feeling a wave of indignation. "It's a possibility," agreed the veterinarian. Many people aren't prepared to deal with an unexpected litter." As they talked, the Labrador kept her eyes fixed on the door that led to the room where her puppy was being treated. Her posture was one of patient waiting, but the tension in her body was visible. "What do you intend to do, Sergeant?" asked Dr. Wilson. James hadn't thought that far ahead. He had acted on instinct the previous night, moved by something in the animal's gaze that had deeply touched him. For now, I'll take her home with me. When the puppy is better, I'll decide the next step. The veterinarian smiled as if already expecting this answer. You know the station has an adoption program for cases like this, right? You could make it official. Let's take it slow, interrupted James. For now, it's just a temporary situation. Before leaving, James stopped near the Labrador and crouched down to be at eye level with her. Let's go home and rest a bit. Your puppy is in good hands, and we'll come back to see him soon, understand? The Labrador looked long at the door where her puppy had disappeared, then back at James. Slowly, as if making a conscious decision, she stood up and walked toward the clinic exit, stopping at the door to wait for him. Amazing, murmured Dr. Wilson. She seems to understand perfectly. James just nodded, feeling there was something special about that newly formed connection, something that might fill the void he had carried since Luna had left. I think we need to give her a name, he said, more to himself than to the veterinarian. How about Hope? Suggested Dr. Wilson. Why, because she didn't give up on finding help for her puppy. That shows remarkable hope. James looked at the Labrador, who returned his gaze with quiet dignity. Hope, he repeated, testing how the name felt. I like it. It fits her. Hope's ears perked up slightly at the sound of her new name, as if approving the choice. For the first time since James had found her, her tail moved in a tentative wag. The winter days grew shorter and colder. Hope's presence in the house was like a cautious dance. She came and went, keeping her mysterious schedules. James never tried to touch her or restrict her movements, respecting the independence that defined her nature. Trust, he knew, couldn't be forced. On a particularly cold afternoon, when the sky darkened prematurely under heavy clouds, James lit the small fireplace he had rarely used since being alone. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the room. He stirred a vegetable stew in the pot, humming softly a tune that Luna's previous owner had taught him. A soft whine surprised him. Hope was sitting near the fireplace, watching the flames with fascination. Her fur, once tangled and dull, was beginning to regain some of its lost softness. The scar on her ear was still there, a permanent mark of her unknown past, but it no longer seemed to define her entire being. Cold, too? James asked, smiling. To his surprise, Hope approached, circling his legs with her tail raised. It was so quick and unexpected that James stood still, fearing to break the spell of that moment. Hope returned to her place near the fireplace, curling into a compact ball, her eyes slowly closing in the warmth of the fire. That night, James served himself some stew and sat in his armchair, a book open on his lap. The rain began to fall outside, rhythmically beating against the windows. The warmth of the fireplace enveloped the room like an embrace. At some point, without him noticing how or when it happened, Hope jumped onto the arm of the chair. She didn't snuggle against him, maintaining the distance she still needed, but she was there, close, breathing in the same space. James continued reading, or pretended to continue, while his heart beat faster. They spent an hour like this, maybe more, in a comfortable silence that said more than 1,000 words. When sleep finally began to overtake him, James got up slowly. Good night, he said softly, leaving the bedroom door ajar. In the morning, he woke up feeling an unusual weight on his feet. Hope was curled up at the foot of the bed, a warm and comforting presence. James blinked several times, making sure he wasn't dreaming. The dog opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. There was no startling, no flight, just a slow blink, the kind that cats reserve for those they trust. James felt his chest flood with an emotion he couldn't name, something between gratitude and wonder. Some invisible barrier had been crossed during the night. As the weeks passed, the trust between them grew like a delicate plant, requiring constant attention and care. James learned Hope's silent language, the meaning of each ear position, each tail movement. Hope, in turn, seemed to understand when he was having a bad day, when the pain in his joints became almost unbearable due to the humidity, or when the longing for normal patrol life with a canine partner tightened like a closed fist in his chest. One morning, while James was watering the few potted plants he kept in the kitchen window, Hope approached, rubbing against his legs. James, distracted, bent down to pet her, an automatic gesture, momentarily forgetting the unspoken barriers between them. His fingers lightly touched the soft fur, and to his surprise, Hope didn't back away. Encouraged, He continued the caress, feeling other scars hidden by the grown fur under his fingertips. He imagined what that small body had faced on the streets. How many battles, how many rejections. Hope allowed the touch for a few seconds before moving away, not with fear, but as if saying, "That's enough for today." "That's okay," James murmured, respecting her space. "We have time." That afternoon, while organizing some old photographs he had avoided looking at since Luna's retirement ceremony, James found an image that made him pause. It was him and Luna, much younger, sitting by a lake. The photograph, yellowed by time, captured the moment when the dog jumped up to catch a frisbee while he looked at her with admiration. The tears came without warning, silent at first, then accompanied by sobs that shook his frail shoulders. James cried as he hadn't done since the day they told him Luna couldn't work anymore due to her degenerating hip condition. He cried for the companionship lost, for the emptiness of the patrol car, for the routine shattered. He didn't notice Hope approaching until he felt a gentle pressure on his knee. The Labrador had placed her paw there, not to ask for attention as she sometimes did before dinner, but in a gesture that seemed deliberately comforting. Her eyes, those amber pools of intelligence, were fixed on him with such understanding that James felt seen in a way he hadn't in months. "Thank you," he whispered, gently placing his hand over her paw. Hope didn't pull away. Instead, she maintained the contact, a bridge between them that spoke volumes in its silence. They remained that way for several minutes, both offering and receiving comfort in a wordless exchange that needed no translation. Later that evening, as a light snow began to fall outside, blanketing the world in hushed white, James received a call from Dr. Wilson. "I have some good news, Sergeant," the veterinarian said, his voice warm with optimism. "The puppy has turned a corner. His vitals are stabilizing, and he's started taking food on his own." "That's fantastic," James replied, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He glanced at Hope, who had perked up her ears at the sound of his voice. "When can we come see him? How about tomorrow morning?" "I think both mother and pup could use the reunion." After hanging up, James knelt beside Hope. "Good news, girl. Your baby is doing better. We'll go see him tomorrow." Hope's tail wagged gently, as if she understood perfectly. There was a new lightness to her movements as she followed James around the cabin that evening, staying closer than usual, her paws making soft padding sounds on the wooden floor. That night, for the first time, Hope didn't sleep at the foot of the bed or in her usual spot by the fireplace. Instead, she climbed onto the bed and settled right next to James, her warm body pressed against his side, her steady breathing syncing with his own. James placed a tentative hand on her back, feeling the rise and fall of her breath, the solid reality of her presence. "We're going to be okay," he whispered into the darkness. "For all three of us." The reunion at the veterinary clinic was something James would remember for the rest of his life. The moment Dr. Wilson brought the puppy into the examination room, Hope's entire demeanor transformed. Her body trembled with restrained emotion, her eyes fixed on the small bundle in the veterinarian's arms. "Go ahead, Doctor," Wilson said softly, placing the puppy on the examination table. Hope approached with delicate steps, sniffing her baby thoroughly, running her tongue over his small body, as if counting each limb, reassuring herself that he was truly okay. The puppy, noticeably stronger than when James had first found him, wiggled with delight at his mother's familiar scent, emitting tiny squeaks of happiness. "He's gained almost half a pound," Dr. Wilson explained, watching the reunion with professional satisfaction. "His hydration levels are normal, and his body temperature has stabilized. I'd say he's ready to go home with you two." "Home," James repeated, the word carrying a new weight. What had begun as a temporary shelter was quickly becoming something more permanent. He realized with sudden clarity that he didn't want to let them go. As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Wilson added, "I took the liberty of registering the chip transfer to your name, Sergeant, unless you'd prefer I didn't." James shook his head. "No, that's perfect, thank you." On the drive back to the cabin, Hope sat in the passenger seat with her puppy nestled securely between her paws. The snow had stopped, leaving behind a pristine landscape that glittered in the midday sun. Cedar Falls looked like a postcard town, its church steeple and old water tower rising above the blanket of white. "We need a name for the little one," James said, glancing at the puppy. "Can't keep calling him the puppy, can we?" The small golden bundle yawned, his tiny pink tongue curling in a perfect miniature of his mother's. "How about Chance?" James suggested, remembering the improbable circumstances of their meeting. Because he got a second chance at life. Hope looked at him with those intelligent eyes, then lowered her head to gently nudge her puppy as if christening him with the new name. The next few weeks established a new rhythm in the cabin. James adjusted his work schedule, taking more administrative duties at the station that allowed him to come home earlier. Captain Reynolds, after hearing the story, had been surprisingly accommodating. "Sometimes life sends us exactly what we need, Mitchell," the captain had said, a knowing look in his eyes, "even when it comes in unexpected packages." Chance grew stronger each day, his playful personality emerging as he gained confidence exploring his new home. Hope watched over him with maternal vigilance that gradually relaxed as she too settled into the security of their new life. The once cautious Labrador now greeted James with enthusiastic tail wags when he returned from work, sometimes bringing him one of Chance's toys as a welcome home gift. One particularly memorable evening, as James sat reviewing case files at the kitchen table, Hope approached with deliberate steps. In her mouth, she carried something he hadn't seen before, a worn leather collar, faded and cracked with age. She placed it carefully on top of his papers, then sat, looking at him expectantly. James picked up the collar, turning it over in his hands. A small metal tag dangled from it, the engraving nearly worn away but still legible. "Hope, service dog in training, David Henderson. Where did you find this?" he asked softly, rubbing his thumb over the tag. Hope simply watched him, her expression inscrutable. James realized the collar must have been hidden somewhere on her when he found her that rainy night, carried as the last connection to her previous life. And now she was offering it to him, a gesture of trust so profound it nearly took his breath away. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep it safe for you." That night, as the three of them settled by the fireplace, James in his armchair, Hope on the rug with Chance curled against her, he felt a sense of completeness that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. This unlikely family, brought together by chance and necessity, was becoming the anchor he hadn't known he needed. Spring arrived with a burst of renewal. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Chance, now nearly 4 months old, had grown into a leggy, energetic puppy whose favorite activity was chasing the newly returned birds in the backyard. James had gradually returned to his regular patrol duties, though he now worked a modified schedule that allowed him to come home midday to check on Hope and Chance. His colleagues had noticed the change in him, the renewed spring in his step, the occasional smile that broke through his formerly stoic demeanor. "That dog's been good for you, Mitchell," Officer Patel commented one afternoon as they finished their shift. "You seem more present," James had to agree. Having Hope and Chance had pulled him back into the world in ways he hadn't anticipated. Their needs anchored him to a routine that extended beyond work and solitude. One warm April morning, as James prepared for his shift, he noticed Hope behaving oddly. She paced by the door, looking back at him repeatedly, then returning to whine softly at the threshold. "What is it, girl? Need to go out?" He opened the door, expecting her to dash into the yard as usual. Instead, Hope stepped out, then stopped, looking back at him expectantly. When he didn't follow immediately, she returned, gently tugged at his pant leg and headed back to the door. "You want me to come with you?" James asked, intrigued by this new behavior. Hope's tail wagged once in affirmation. Curious and with enough time before his shift, James followed her out. Chance, still sleeping in his bed, didn't stir as they left. Hope led him with purposeful steps toward the wooded area behind the cabin. James had rarely ventured here, despite having lived at the property for years. The path was overgrown in places, but Hope seemed to know exactly where she was going. After about 15 minutes of walking, they emerged into a small clearing dominated by a magnificent old oak tree. Hope stopped, looking up at the tree, then back at James. "What is it? What are you showing me?" Hope circled the tree, then sat beside a particular spot where the roots formed a natural hollow. James knelt down to examine the area and noticed something unexpected. A small wooden box, weathered by the elements but still intact, wedged between two large roots. With careful hands, he extracted the box. It was simple but well crafted, with a sliding lid that still moved smoothly despite obvious exposure to the elements. Inside, protected by a plastic bag, was a folded piece of paper and a small object wrapped in cloth. James unfolded the paper first. It was a letter, the handwriting neat, but clearly penned by someone elderly. To whoever finds this, my name is David Henderson. If you're reading this, it likely means I'm gone, and somehow my Hope has brought you here. She always was the smartest dog I ever trained. Hope came to me as a rescue when she was just a year old. I trained her to be a service dog, but she became much more. My companion, my friend, my reason to keep going after my wife passed. The doctors tell me I don't have much time left, and though my niece has promised to take Hope, I worry she won't understand what a special dog she is. In this box is my wife's wedding ring. I've kept it all these years because I couldn't bear to part with it. But material things mean nothing where I'm going. If Hope has brought you here, it means she trusts you completely. And if she trusts you, then I do too. Take care of her. She deserves a good life with someone who understands her heart. With gratitude, David Henderson. James's hands trembled as he carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal a simple gold wedding band. He looked at Hope, who had settled beside him, her eyes fixed on the letter in his hands. "You knew this was here all along," he said softly. "Not a question, but a realization. You were waiting until you were sure about me." Hope leaned against his side, her warm presence a silent affirmation. James carefully returned the ring to its wrapping and placed it back in the box along with the letter. This wasn't his to take. It was part of Hope's history, a testament to the love that had shaped her. As they walked back to the cabin, Hope stayed close to his side, occasionally looking up at him as if to check that he understood the significance of what she had shared. And he did. She had given him a glimpse into her past, entrusted him with the memory of the man who had loved her first. It was the final barrier between them, dissolved in an act of trust so profound it left James speechless with gratitude. 1 year had passed since that rainy night when Hope had appeared out of the fog with her precious burden. Chance had grown into a handsome young dog, his golden coat gleaming with health, his playful spirit a constant source of joy in the house. The three of them had settled into a comfortable routine. James had officially adopted both dogs through the police department's program. Hope had even begun accompanying him to the station occasionally, where her calm demeanor and intelligence had made her a favorite among his colleagues. It was Captain Reynolds who first suggested the idea. "That dog of yours has a gift, Mitchell," he said one afternoon, watching Hope gently interact with a distressed witness in the station. "Have you considered getting her certified as a therapy dog?" The idea took root, and within months Hope had completed the necessary training, much of which James discovered she already knew instinctively. Now she regularly visited the local hospital and elementary school, her gentle presence bringing comfort to patients and children alike. Chance, showing an aptitude for tracking that surprised everyone but James, had begun basic training for search and rescue work. Dr. Wilson joked that it was in his blood, this desire to help others. "Like mother, like son," the veterinarian had commented during Chance's last checkup. "Some things are just meant to be." On the anniversary of their meeting, James decided to do something special. He took the day off work and drove Hope and Chance to Silver Lake, a beautiful spot just outside town where he used to bring Luna. They spent the morning hiking the surrounding trails, Chance bounding ahead with youthful enthusiasm, while Hope remained close to James, their steps synchronized after months of walking side by side. As they rested by the shoreline, watching the sunlight dance across the water's surface, James found himself reflecting on the unexpected turns his life had taken. A year ago, he had been a solitary figure, going through the motions of a life half-lived. The retirement of his canine partner had left a void he didn't know how to fill. Then, on a rainy night when he least expected it, Hope had literally found him, in the form of a golden Labrador with an indomitable spirit and a puppy in need. "You saved me, you know," he told Hope quietly, running his hand along her silky ears. "As much as I saved you that night." Hope leaned against him, her warm weight a solid presence at his side. Chance, tired from his explorations, flopped down at their feet, his tongue lolling contentedly. That evening, as they returned to the cabin, James was surprised to see Dr. Wilson's car in the driveway. The veterinarian was waiting on the porch, a mysterious smile on his face and a large manila envelope in his hands. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," he said as James approached, "but I thought you'd want to see this right away." Inside the envelope was a letter from the National Search Dog Foundation accepting Chance into their training program. Along with it was a certification for Hope as a fully qualified therapy dog, complete with a professional vest and ID badge. The foundation rarely accepts dogs this young, Dr. Wilson explained, beaming with obvious pride. But they made an exception after seeing the video of his practice sessions. They said his instincts are exceptional, just like his mother's. James felt a swell of emotion as he looked at the two dogs beside him. Hope, with her dignified pose and wise eyes, Chance, with his youthful exuberance and eager spirit. They were no longer strays found in the rain, but valued members of the community, with purposes as important as his own. That night, as the three of them settled in their usual spots by the fireplace, James in his armchair, Hope at his feet, Chance sprawled nearby, he realized that his house had become truly a home. The silence that had once seemed oppressive was now comfortable, filled with the quiet breathing of his companions and the occasional soft snore from Chance. Hope raised her head, meeting his gaze with that same deep understanding that had captivated him from the beginning. James reached down to stroke her head, and she leaned into his touch, a gesture of complete trust and contentment. "We've come full circle, haven't we?" he murmured. Hope's tail thumped gently against the floor in agreement, while Chance dreamed puppy dreams nearby. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, not the cold downpour of that fateful night, but a soft spring shower that promised new growth, new beginnings. For James Mitchell, sergeant of Cedar Falls Police Department, life had found its rhythm again. A rhythm marked by paw prints alongside his own footsteps, by joyful barks and quiet companionship, by the countless small moments that, strung together, created something miraculous. A family forged not by blood but by choice and circumstance, and the remarkable capacity for love that exists between humans and the animals who choose them. In the end, it wasn't about who saved whom. It was about the journey they had taken together, from strangers in the rain to a family bound by something stronger than words could express. And in that journey lay a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage aren't grand gestures, but small moments of trust offered in the face of uncertainty, like a mother's decision to place her puppy in the hands of a stranger, or a lonely man's choice to open his door to two strays on a rainy night. Hope had lived up to her name, and in doing so, she had given James something he thought he'd lost forever, the chance to begin again. My friends, we have reached the end of the story. Did you like it? What lesson can you bring to life from this story? Leave it here in the comments. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and watch this video that's playing on your screen. This story will impact you. See you next time.